Okay, everybody. Well, welcome back. We're officially going to start now. Welcome back to our third and final season of our Reimagining World 2025 virtual community gathering series. So we are so excited again to be here for our final session tonight. We have, again, a terrific lineup of speakers. Jeff Siegler from Revitalize or Die. And we're also going to be hearing from the community of Broadus and see what they've been up to since participating in Reimagining Rural. If you have not, please sign in using the QR code or using a paper method. Just sign in sheet. We really appreciate it. We need to collect folks' names and addresses so that we can contact you after this is done to complete an evaluation on Reimagining Rural. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Taylor Crow with Montana Community Foundation. So we have been so fortunate and blessed to have them as a partner since we started Reimagining Rural in 2019. And they've just been a tremendous partner and supporter of this program and also of our rural communities. And I'm pretty sure she has some exciting news to share with you all. So I will let her talk. Taylor.
Thanks, Jennifer. As Jennifer mentioned, we're the Montana Community Foundation is kind of on the planning team for Reimagining Rural. And one of the big pieces or roles that we play is helping communities kind of implement some of the ideas that might have come up during Reimagining Rural. And so back when Reimagining Rural started, one of the ideas that we brought to the table was, what if we provided some like seed grants, so some small grants for communities at the end of these sessions so they can really kind of tackle whatever community project, whether that's big or small, that's kind of like rising to the top of the list for them. So I'm excited to announce, and this is maybe not a secret for some that have participated in Reimagining Rural in the past, but we're going to do the seed grants again this year. So it's our 5th year of providing these seed grants. I think we've given out now like $85,000 plus across the state for these like implementation projects, which is really fun and exciting. The projects have ranged from everything from like doing a mural to reactivate a space downtown, to community involvement expos to kind of continue some of the conversations around Reimagining Rural, to kind of larger projects. They've been like the first $1,500 or $2,000 into projects that have turned out into $150,000 plus, revitalizing like a vacant lot on Main Street. So really, the sky's the limit when it comes to these Reimagining Rural grants, and we're able to offer them this year in conjunction with the Wells Fargo Foundation. So a big shout out to them. I think Jennifer is going to provide you some of this information as well in like her follow-up email, so you don't need to like scramble and write all of this down, and I'll also put it in the chat. But broadly, how these will work this year is there'll be grants that are available for communities that have participated in all 3 sessions of Reimagining Rural, either kind of live as they're occurring or watching the recording. The grants will range from $500 to $2,000, with the majority of grants probably being around $1,500. Really, the projects are very broad. Really, anything that came out of Reimagining Rural, with projects that are kind of involving different community members, different facets of your community, and that maybe came out of some of the topics and sessions that we've covered, kind of rising to the top of the list for funding consideration. The application is open now, so it'll open tonight, or actually technically I pressed the button this afternoon, so it's already open, with applications being due March 31st, so it's about 6 weeks, and then we'll make funding decisions in kind of like mid to late April. And we're also going to host, as we've done in the past, kind of like midway through that application process, like a Reimagining Rural grant office hour. So right now I have that scheduled on March 13th at 11. But really, it's an opportunity to come and brainstorm ideas or ask questions about the grant and the application. One of the things that we try to do here at the Montana Community Foundation is make funding opportunities more accessible for everybody, particularly folks in rural communities. And so I encourage you to reach out either during those office hours or to me separately if you have any questions or if you want to talk through ideas or brainstorm answers to the application itself. And the application is pretty simple. I think should take less than like an hour to complete. Yeah, that's kind of all I had, unless I'm missing anything, Jennifer or Tara.
I don't think so. It's fast and furious. We know that. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you to the Montana Community Foundation and the Wells Fargo Foundation for helping support this. As Taylor said, y'all don't panic. We will send information out to you on these grants. We also have a list. Tara just shared this with me. We have a list of previous projects that communities have done, and we'll send that out to you too, just in case you're having a hard time brainstorming. But we will help you through this as well. So don't feel like after tonight, we send you off and you're off on your own. If you need some help or guidance or anything, we will certainly help you with that, because at the end of the day, we really want you all to be successful and have something show for your work. So just know that we'll send you out more information, and we will make sure that you have adequate help and support as you go through the application process. So, okay. With that, I'm trying to keep us on task. So we've got a couple minutes until we move into our presentation with Jeff. I just want to go over a few things. So again, this is our third night. Y'all have probably been here before. So Reimagining Rural is just a place for us to inspire our rural folks to reimagine their community, to embrace different perspectives, to connect, and to create positive change. So that was the goal of our project. It's not a comprehensive community development project. It is merely the beginning of dipping your toes into this and having conversations and figuring out what are some action items that you can be doing right away. Okay, so again, if you have technical problems, Skylar's on here. She's our gal. She's the expert. That's her email there and her phone number. So if something happens and you need help, give Skylar a shout out. So tonight we're doing the introductions, a brief recap. So we're going to have the speaker and the community success stories. Then we'll follow up with your local conversations and then do a quick wrap up. So with that, I am so super stoked to have Jeff Siegler with us here tonight. So you can go to his website. It's called Revitalize or Die. He also has a book out called Your City is Sick. I do not remember how I found Jeff. I don't know if it was through Rebecca Endem or Growing Small Towns or whatever, but from the minute, Tara can attest to this, from the minute I found him, I was like hooked. I just, everything you put out, I was just sharing and following, and I bought the book and everything. So I am really super excited to have him here and have him speaking to our rural communities, because when he starts talking about apathy, it just so hits home to me. And so often I see this with our small towns, is that we just become so indifferent to the things that are happening in our community. And we need out of that. So I'm just super excited to have him here speaking with us tonight. Jeff is going to be speaking until about 6:50. And then we'll move into the Broadus conversation. So with that, I am going to stop, hopefully, sharing my slide. Maybe.
I can boot you out if it gets spicy.
Boot me out, Skylar. Please. Okay. And we'll let. Am I still sharing my screen? Oh, you got me. Okay. And we will let Jeff share his screen or talk with us, whatever he's going to do. And I'm going to stop. So thank you, Jeff. Thank you for coming. Welcome to our virtual community gathering with our small towns across Montana.
So good to be here. Very good to see you again, Jennifer, and for the people out in Broadus. Welcome. Good to see you all again. I want to apologize first. I'm a little, I've got a little something, so I'm going to be sniffling a fair amount and clearing my throat. So I apologize. And I am coming to you from Jacksonville City Hall tonight, which is a little odd. So not where I usually present from, but that's how things worked. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for having me. It's good to be back with the fine folks in Montana. I love your state very much, and I've been fortunate to visit a couple times over the past few years. And yeah, and thanks for the kind introduction, Jennifer. So, you know what? I'm going to jump right in because that makes the most sense. Because this presentation can take a whole hour, so we have a little less than that. So I started I was a Main Street manager for about 2 years in Ohio, and then I ran the Ohio Main Street program for about 10 years. And an experience that always sort of stuck with me from that time that really started to shape my thinking about this work that we do in community development, economic development, tourism, chamber, all the various facets, the various facets of community improvement. And I was heading out to East Liverpool, Ohio, and East Liverpool sits over on the Ohio River, right at the West Virginia border. And I hated going there. I did not like going there for work, and it was always a bummer. And those of us in the office kind of always tried to pawn it off on one another. And one day I was leaving to head out to go there, and my coworker Frank was like, "Have fun in the Depression Belt today." And I kind of laughed it off. And on the drive over, I got to thinking about it. And one, it's like, ooh, that's pretty rough. Like that's kind of a harsh joke. But two, it made me think like, why is that? Like, why do I dread going there? Why is it? What's the experience of being in that town that just made me feel crummy? And it really did. I mean, just a half day there was like I don't know. I was gonna say a week in any other town, but no, it wasn't like that. It really wore you down, and there was always infighting, and somebody's to blame, and we can't do it because so and so tried it this long ago, and I can't work with that person because his granddaddy said this about me. And no matter what time of year you went there, it was like middle March weather, and the buildings were just run down, and it was frustrating. And you'd go and you'd think you make progress, and you come back a year later and nothing was different. And what really struck me was that I felt run down if I was there for an afternoon. And what happens if you live there? What's the experience of coming to call that place home? And it's like, oh, well, that would affect me differently. That would be, I would be less happy. I would feel, more run down all the time. And that's kind of the power of place. And that's what really got me thinking more about how much this thing affects us. Why does that place make me feel a certain way? And it wasn't just me, obviously. It was my coworkers too. And there's towns that we'd love to go to. There's towns that made your day brighter. That was, you look forward to for weeks going to visit. And, it wasn't just the people. And it really set me on this path of thinking about how much the shape of our place is the shape of us. How a community begins to, the community reflects the citizens, and the citizens reflect the community. And what other way could it be? Of course, a community that's full of, I don't know, a community full of yuppies is going to behave a certain way and drive a certain car. Or, community full of Scandinavian, settlers or migrants is going to have certain characteristics. And a community full of people that might be, a little depressed, a little run down, or a little dysfunctional is tend to going to behave that way. And I was seeing a lot of that the community does really pick up the characteristics of the people that live there. And one of the things that always struck me about that work is like the hardest community to help was the one that was dysfunctional. Was the community that no matter what advice you gave, they said, no, that won't work. Or that might work fine for this town, but we're not that town, or couldn't get out of their own way. But the very very similar traits that you would run into when dealing with a person that was dysfunctional. Just couldn't get out of their way, couldn't take advice, always had an excuse, and so it made me realize, like, we're not getting through to these towns because we're approaching it the wrong way. We think it's some sort of technical solution. If you just get this grant or do a plan that'll make them better, but that's not how people work. So that's not how a town works. And a couple years later, still sort of in this, still ruminating over East Liverpool, and how we start to make improvements in the places like that, how the hardest towns to help are the ones that need it the most, and we couldn't do much. We were doing very little to help, and that was frustrating. And so a few years later, I was working in Massillon, Ohio, with a planning firm, and was helping them. And we were doing the public input portion where you ask everybody what they want and then completely ignore it, and then ask them again in a few years. And the responses were so funny because everybody kept saying, oh, we're really proud. There's the proudest community. Massillon couldn't be more proud. Oh, our biggest weakness is, like, we're just too proud. And it was it was interesting. It was odd because I'd never heard a community claim that so much. And I was like, well, that's great. What an awesome attribute to have. And after the meeting, the colleague and I went for a walk around town just to kind of get a lay of the land. And it was odd because as I started looking for all the signs of their pride, I couldn't find it. It wasn't in the condition of the downtown buildings. It wasn't necessarily in the sidewalks. It wasn't in the storefront windows. It wasn't in the public space or people's yards or their front porches or even City Hall. Like, all those places where you think that you would witness pride, because I'm a big believer that pride is something that's absolutely visible. You couldn't see it. You couldn't find it. And it was, I was really confused. Why did this town claim to be so proud? Yet it didn't look that way. No one would drive through there and think, man, this is one proud place. And it dawned on me later that you can even see it here in the slide that all those little flags coming off the light posts are about their high school football team. They have one of the biggest high school football stadiums. They are absolutely obsessed, and they have conflated this idea of community pride with pride for their football team, and those aren't the same thing. And while on one hand it was really disheartening to see, on the other hand it was kind of telling that they were desperate to place their pride in something, and maybe it didn't get to be the condition of their town, so they put it somewhere else. But ideally, that the community would be more important than young men and what they do on a Friday night in fall. So that really was kind of an epiphany for me, that pride is this. What I'd realized that dysfunction that I was seeing in East Liverpool was in essence apathy, and that what I was seeing and what dawned on me in working as Maslin is like, oh, what they were striving to have is pride, and those two things are opposite. Like, if you want, they're opposite ends of a continuum. And if a community is dealing with pride, really the only way to combat that is through. Sorry, if a community is dealing with apathy, really the only way to combat that is through pride. Like, apathy is not caring anything, and pride is caring very much. And I think the fewer things we have to care about in life, the worse off we are, the more in danger we are, the less attached we are, and probably the more susceptible we are to kind of struggles. And pride is, the more things that we have to care for, to tend to look out for, the more we are, the more we have. And so it just reframed my whole thinking about this field of community revitalization, and I think gave me a lot of insight to how we could do things better. And around the same time, I was I'd moved to Pittsburgh, and oftentimes was driving past this town of Aliquippa, and it just struck me all the time as I passed this, like this on Route 65. This is the sign that welcomes you to Aliquippa, a rusty sign on rotting boards that's in a field of weeds in front of a falling down building. And it's like, boy, that screams apathy. It screams we don't care at all. And what a sad message that is. This is my announcement to the outside world of who we are as a community, and how much that hurts and how much it stings. But really what made me think more about this was, that's what it announces to people coming in from outside. But what does it say to somebody that puts on their blinker when they're coming down the highway and has to turn into Aliquippa because that's where they live. That's a whole another, community psychology. There's a lot wrapped up in that. There's a lot of self-esteem issues that come with that. There's a lot of, civility issues and pride issues. And clearly there's going to be, if that's the type of place that you call home, you understand that your hometown's you're going to have a different relationship with it than maybe somebody else might. And how much that affects the community and why that matters so much. Like these simple appearances aren't so simple at all. It's a really big deal. And so, spending a lot of time thinking about how pride affects us, how apathy affects us, how it affects us as individuals, but also affects us on a community level. What I thought about my hometown of Lima, Ohio, and like what happened. How did a community that by all signs from all the stories and all the photos used to be an extremely proud place, and no longer was by the time I was growing up there. And I wanted to better understand, like, how does a community go from being proud to being apathetic? What happens? And so I really, just spent some time thinking about it, reading and talking to people and trying to better understand this whole notion. And what I realized that there are some key components to what makes an individual proud, but what makes a community proud. And that our towns used to have those components in spades. And one of the big ones was effort. It people put in effort. There was a lot of effort. Excuse me. An extreme amount of effort was expended in creating these places, in building these towns and in hacking them out of the woods, and building the roads and the buildings. And like effort is something that makes us proud. That's why I get so frustrated when I go to when I want to get involved in an organization and they say, well, oh, join this committee, or, you're going to go to a meeting and hear people just talk. It's like, no, I don't want to listen to people talk. That is not satisfying. That is not rewarding. I want to put in effort. Like I would rather put in hard work to see something get better than to sit around and talk about something getting better, because then it never does. So effort is crucial. Anything in your life that you're proud of required effort, and anything the community is going to be proud of is going to require effort. There's no way around it. And the great thing about effort is it inevitably leads to progress. And our communities had a ton of progress. They went from being woods, trees and rocks, to a dirt road, to a paved road, from 1-story wood buildings to 3-story brick buildings, or whatever, that they grew and they changed and they improved. And progress without fail makes us feel good. And that is a component of pride. When you work hard at an instrument and get better, when you work hard at your job and get better, it feels really good to get better. And we have to really always keep that in mind. And that's not something somebody can bestow upon you from outside. No one can make you as an individual better. And it's pretty hard for somebody outside of your community to make it better as well. These things usually have to come from within. Ownership has a huge role to play in pride. We're, again, as individuals, if you started a business, you're proud of that. If you earned money to buy a car or the house or whatever it is, the jewelry, you're proud of that in a way that's different from something you might be borrowing or something that might have even been gifted to you. And our communities used to have this tremendous sense of ownership. The businesses and the buildings were all owned by people from within the community, and you would know those people and you would recognize the names on the top of the buildings. And there's just something different about the pride that comes from ownership. And that's not to say that somebody that rents doesn't feel the same way. There's a collective sense of ownership as well. But renters aren't the problem nearly as much as this idea that most of the commerce in our communities are now national chains, and most of the banks, new housing subdivisions, they were built from somebody, they weren't built by somebody local. They might be owned by somebody local, but that love and care didn't go in to the construction. The towns are beautiful. I mean, there was a reason Lima and all these towns were built beautifully, because there was this understanding that they should be, that this was where people, what people called their home. This is what they spent, this is where they spent their day. This is the backdrop to all the actions in their life. And it mattered that it was pretty. Craftsmanship was a big deal. And using local materials and using these old world trades, it mattered, and people wanted to have pride in their place and do things right. And there's another reason that I found really fascinating that I didn't think of for years until it must have been Chuck Marone that pointed it out, but that, a beautiful city hall stabilizes and raises property values around it. In essence, like a beautiful building like that pays for itself over time because everybody wants to have their building next to something that beautiful. So they it's something that would never get built today, yet it's still of the highest value and what people appreciate the most in their towns. There's a really rich sense of community that I believe our towns used to have that has dissipated, and the idea of knowing somebody, knowing all these people, like these fascinating people that call your community home. The I don't know, the grocer or the hotelier or the mechanic, or these people that just have these skills, the mason, that these people that have these amazing skills and demonstrate them and make a living through them. There's something really fascinating about that. Even if you know somebody in town that owns a store anymore, like there's just something cool about knowing that person that feels good in a way. Or another way I thought about it is, like, I remember when the Olympics were on this past summer, and I checked around to see if there were any, local people, if anybody from Pittsburgh was in the Olympics, because like that's kind of exciting. And I certainly would have had nothing to do with their being there. But there is something that we're proud of in terms of our community. And legacies are something that make us proud. This idea of leaving something behind. These are my grandparents, my mother's parents on the left, and my father's father on the right. And like, they attempted to leave a legacy. They wanted to leave their town better than they found it. They wanted to leave something behind, and there is something tremendously be proud of in that, of making a path a little easier for those that come behind you, and saying it was better for having had you there. So, Lima, like so many of our towns, I think, was a place that was easy to be proud of. It was, it was beautiful. It was built with these local materials, and progress. Sorry, I got off. Progress was always being made, and there was an incredible amount of effort that went in to building it, to the construction, to making sure that these places were beautiful, to and all this progress that took place, and knowing everybody that owned the businesses and buildings, and just being in a place like that, I think, was extremely easy to be proud of, and how much that matters. And I feel like we kind of botched that. Like, we took a gift. We took something that was extremely special and beautiful, and we turned our backs on it. We threw it away. And I feel like we really got caught up in this idea of this convenience economy of national chains, and let's build a bunch of houses quickly. Let's make sure that we have whatever chain business is cool or whatever. And so much of what made our community strong went away when we kind of opened up the doors to outsiders, and not that necessarily that outsiders are bad, but national chains and national developers, are very much in the extraction community, and when you have too many of them, the money goes away. And what I noticed is that in becoming sort of car dominant and sprawl dominant communities, there's a lot of things that were pushing down. Like, apathy was increasing and pride was decreasing. And one of the main reasons I see is, like, there was a real depression in standards, that things that we never would have accepted in the past started to become more and more acceptable. Like, like trash in an empty lot, or a building not being maintained, or a front porch, like things that somebody would have said something about, became more acceptable. And no one, no entity, no building, no business, no individual has ever improved by lowering standards. But there's kind of this pressure to say, hey, economic development, we don't property rights and all this. We don't tell people what to do. And, next thing you know, I had this argument in Texas last fall, and somebody's like, well, it's my building. I'll do what I want. I'm free. And I said, well, yeah, it is your choice to live in squalor. That is absolutely your choice. But I just don't understand why you would want to. I don't know why you would want to raise your family there. I don't know why that would be good enough. Like, yes, it's your right, but that doesn't seem to make a healthy community. the amount of ownership changed dramatically. More national chains when it comes to food and banks, and even gotten to the point where it's like optometrists and dentists, and just fewer people owning their own business. I always am reminded that Walmart's not just one businesses. That's 50 mom and pop shops under one roof. If you go through the list of the departments in a Walmart, those were all little shops in the town before. And there's 5 of the 10 wealthiest individuals in the country live in Bentonville, Arkansas. And it's for a reason. The nature of work has changed so much. And look, I'm not, it's a funny photo, but I'm certainly not degrading anybody that is willing to show up to work for pay. But we all know that a job working for yourself or working for somebody in town, or a friend or neighbor, is going to be different from working for Applebee's or TGI Fridays. Like, that's going to be a job that's going to be hard to feel good about. You're serving bad food from a corporation that's in town to make money and take more money out of your town, and you're never going to be treated as well. You're never going to have as much meaning in that type of work. And, it's just harder for people to feel a sense of pride. Or this sense of community has changed so much, more time in cars, more time on the phones, and less public space. I read a really good article recently that did identify as, lack of public space, that we started investing less in the public square and in pretty public places, really had a huge damper in the 60s and 70s on how much we got together. And the Atlantic just had a really fascinating, such a depressing article about the century of isolation, and that 75% of all restaurant business now is takeout. Like, people are just not getting together anymore, and that's sad. That depresses us. That makes us apathetic as well, because we have fewer people looking out for us, but we also have fewer people to look out for, which is a big part of our lives, is checking in on people, making sure that hey, somebody depends on us, and that matters. And how much this changed, again, I'm thinking to Lima, but this is my family. These are the folks and the siblings, and I'm super not happy about this tie issue or my haircut. But Lima changed so dramatically from my grandparents' day to my day, that everybody left. My parents, by the time we graduated, said, you should move on. There's not enough opportunity here for you. It's not a place that's going to maybe provide you with the type of life that they felt that we deserved. And I don't think that all of a sudden, after 5 generations, we were the bougiest people in Lima. But I don't think that we changed. I think the community changed significantly, and my folks saw it changing in a way that wasn't going to be, that wouldn't maybe create the type of outcomes that they would like to see for us. And how terribly depressing that is. Like, those are the people I would most like to see in the world all the time, and never miss a soccer game or a birthday, and or spread around the country now. Same with a legacy. This was my grandfather's motel. Something he was extremely proud to leave behind. Something that would have been cool to step into a business that already existed. And this is that same lot today. It's inside of a Cloverleaf interchange. And my father's father came home from the war and started a food distribution business. And while this wasn't, this isn't the building itself, it was in this within a couple blocks from here. And that's what the area looks like today. And how does that happen? How is that possibly allowed to happen? Something that was so special, something that was so beautiful and nice, and just to be allowed to deteriorate. And and then we went from building beautiful to garbage. Well, Lazarus doesn't going to want to spend a bunch of money on a pretty brick building. Like, they have money to make. So the nature of beauty just changed, and we were told, it's fine, it's good enough, that you're lucky to have this national chain. So this is a crazy style. And I think about beauty a lot in my work, and why it matters so much. And it's something that we're very dismissive of. It's something that we've kind of been told repeatedly, oh, that's hanging baskets, what a waste of money, or that's putting flour, or lipstick on a pig, or whatever the dumb things are. And what a preposterous notion that beauty doesn't matter. Like, that's every single corporation knows that their product should be attractive. Every like if you want to sell a home for more, it should be pretty. If we travel the world, everybody pays more for a pretty home or to have a restaurant and I mean, our meal in a beautiful restaurant or stay in a beautiful hotel. Like, of course, beauty matters. Like, it's asinine to think otherwise, and it's so frustrating to hear people say that. But I think it goes to a deeper level too. And this is, sorry, where my story gets really depressing, but um, place matters so much. It's like certain places I think are very comforting. I actually think it's much less subjective and much more of a science than an art. And certain places like are soothing or relaxing or beautiful or make us feel elegant and sophisticated that are like very, very beneficial to our well-being. And then there's places that make us feel run down and crummy. Um, and where this kind of hit home with me is, I had a friend that in Pittsburgh, a coworker that had passed away of an overdose, and I went up to the funeral and I was walking around afterward to clear my head around his hometown and came upon this main street. And it was on one hand appalling, on the other hand kind of affirming. That's like, well, yeah, I'm not entirely surprised that this being the center or the heart of a community, that there's going to be addiction issues, that there might be crime issues or mental health issues. Like, all of us look at rundown conditions, at decay, and understand that decay often doesn't lead to people being healthy. Like, you would look at this and say, kids roll up their windows, or there's probably needles laying around, or all the conclusions that you would jump to are there for a reason. It's literally the landscape of decay and depression and addiction. Like, it's not like a bunch of addicted people move to neighborhoods like this and buy up all the real estate. It's people that already live there adapt to rundown conditions. Things get crummy and then people start to feel crummy. It relates back to East Liverpool, people living in a community that wasn't being maintained, and they start to feel it's hard. Like, when you don't care for something, it becomes harder to care for. And this was a town that became harder and harder to care for. The people had less to care about. And when we don't care about things, like, that's a certain amount of pain. That's a certain amount of pain that you want to numb. If there's no good local work, if there's nothing pretty to look at, if there's nowhere nice to go, if there's nothing special to do, if there's nowhere that you can feel sophisticated or dignified, how are you going to experience those feelings that are extremely important to feel and adjust how you think and behave? Now, there's a video next, and I just don't know if there's going to be sound. So if somebody could
Much of
jump on
that
audio
research
and let me
used
know if there's
animal
sound or
studies,
not.
particularly
the sound.
laboratory
Oh,
rats.
perfect.
Rats would be placed in really small cages called
Thank
Skinner
you.
boxes.
A Skinner box is a box which is just about 3 times the size of a rat. The experiments involved putting rats in Skinner boxes with a needle which was implanted in their jugular vein, so that if the rats pressed the little lever on the wall, they would get a little surge of heroin in their bloodstream.
Press the pedal, get a shot of heroin. Press the pedal, get another shot.
And in some cases, they just kept pumping heroin into themselves to the point where they forgot to eat and would die.
Beliefs about rat studies would find their way into PSAs and Hollywood films, and they would become part of our collective understanding of just how dangerous these drugs really were.
These experiments...
Oh, God. No, I wanted to get I've done something terrible.
Much of that research used
I just wanted to get the little play sign off.
Much
So
of that
you're gonna get
research
to
used
start
animal
again.
studies,
Sorry.
particularly laboratory rats. Rats would be placed in really small cages called Skinner boxes.
A Skinner box is a box which is just about 3 times the size of a rat. The experiments involved putting rats in Skinner boxes with a needle which was implanted in their jugular vein, so that if the rats pressed the little lever on the wall, they would get a little surge of heroin in their bloodstream.
Press the pedal, get a shot of heroin. Press the pedal, get another shot.
And in some cases, they just kept pumping heroin into themselves to the point where they forgot to eat and would die.
Beliefs about rat studies would find their way into PSAs and Hollywood films, and they would become part of our collective understanding of just how dangerous these drugs really were.
These experiments seem to show that any creature, including even the lowly rat, if given access to heroin, would simply take lots and lots of it.
But Bruce had another idea.
What these experiments really show is that rats who are in solitary confinement will take lots of heroin.
See, rats are very social animals. Rats don't normally spend their lives in harnesses with catheters shoved in their necks. They prefer playing with other rats, running around, doing rat stuff.
To put a rat in a Skinner box is to make this very, very social creature live a life of solitary confinement.
Bruce and his colleagues wondered if maybe these rats were taking so many drugs because they were living in such an unnatural environment. So he organized his own rat experiment, but with some important differences. Most notably, he built a much bigger enclosure for them.
About half as big as my garage floor, as a matter of fact.
Bruce and his colleagues filled it with everything a rat could want: food, running wheels, and other rats to play with. He called it Rat Park. His team put a group of rats in the park and another group of rats in solitary cages. They made morphine freely available to both. The results were eye-opening. Giving the choice between plain water and morphine, the Rat Park residents chose the water. It's not like the rats in Rat Park totally abstained from morphine, but
You could say that they acted more or less like human recreational users of morphine.
Bruce and his colleagues even tried an experiment where the rats in cages were giving nothing but morphine-laced water to drink for 57 days straight.
In other words, we made sure they were good and addicted. In terms of the conventional expectation, every one of those rats should have been addicted for the rest of its life.
But when they were placed in Rat Park, those same addicted rats generally chose to drink the plain water and voluntarily went through withdrawal.
People were shocked that the rats in Rat Park had so little interest in morphine.
The Rat Park study suggested a much more complex picture of addiction than many people had suspected. Addiction wasn't simply a story of chemicals rewiring our brains or hijacking our reward centers. Other factors like environment, feeling of isolation or hopelessness, poor social bonds, and lack of control all likely play an important role in what leads to addiction.
So I know that was probably out of left field, a Rat Park conversation, but it just confirms so much. I mean, I was kind of amazed when I first came across that, and it confirmed so much of the lonely, the isolation of living in a cage devoid of anything. Like there's a rat will go to numb the pain, and I think that we can probably say that we've seen a lot of we've seen these things increase in all of our communities of isolation, addiction, and mental health issues. And I'm a big believer that when I'm sure that there's a number of contributing factors, I certainly am a big believer that it's the nature of our places that have changed, and how much of there were so many things to be proud of, and we've taken those were all allowed to deteriorate, and take something special and watch it deteriorate. And like, how's that going to affect you? How's that going to change you? I think our places have just changed so much in that way. And now, again, this is a pretty painful cage to live in, and so while this is new and meant to look prettier, it's we still see the problem. It's still not actually beautiful. It's still not actually special. It's it's not joyful or connected or any of those things. And these are what a lot of us have. And I know that there's a lot more rural towns in Montana, and things look a little different, but there certainly is plenty of plenty of light as well in a lot of the towns. And so we had these really special places that were easy to be proud of. And again, this is the line of my grandparents, like beautiful, connected, social, locally owned, making progress, a lot of effort going in, and I'm pretty sure that if I lived there, I would have a different life, that I would feel different. And this was the Lima that my generation grew up with. Ugly, no local ownership, nothing pretty, nobody running into each other or feeling connected. We've swapped out one for the other, and then we are surprised that the people that live there have changed. And one is the landscape of beauty and pride, and the other is of apathy. And like, that's a very natural response. So I think we spend a lot of time kind of blaming the individual in society when it's the most natural thing in the world. You can't look at these two things and even suggest that people would be sort of the same in those environments. Like, that's unrealistic, that somebody would feel the same way in those two places, that our environment is constantly affecting us. And that's why they matter so much. And so I think my generation grew up with something entirely different, and is less connected, is less civic minded, is less civil, and sad. But that is also something that can be fixed. Like, it doesn't have to be that way forever. And so that's kind of the genesis of this, or the base for this, is that yeah, this thing happened where we had these really beautiful places that we squandered. We changed the way we thought about them. We let nice things fall into blight. We didn't foster local business enough, or we invested in this idea of more roads would help and more sprawl would be good, when all the while we really had the right answer. A lot of local, a lot of small, a lot of local developers and owning buildings in town, and businesses that were owned in town, and pretty things that we took care of. And that's led to us, I don't think, having as healthy community. So sort of came to the conclusion is that the our solution has to be in building pride back. That it's an emotional problem. It's not this technical thing. Like, what we need to do is think about that the people that live in towns are emotional, and if we only use our economic development brain of thinking, like, we'll never figure this out, because that hasn't worked at all for 40 years. Humans, residents, are emotional, and we have to appeal to their emotion. We have to make them proud of their place. It has to be beautiful. It needs to be connected and joyful. It should be fun. God, like, there's no meeting that's better for having, for like being in a boring office space. That doesn't make a meeting technically better. Or using Robert's rule, like, lighten up. These things should be joyful, and we're going to be more successful if they are. Um, so some things that we can do to start to restore civic pride really fall in these 5 camps of, our identity, improving, raising our standards, increasing local ownership, fostering the sense of community, and improving appearances. And identity, like we derive a lot of pride from who we are, where we came from, what are our stories, what did we overcome. And some of the ways I've seen that are really amazing that communities have done to build that sense of identity is traditions. Like, not a fundraiser, nothing that's sponsorship, just a simple tradition of, we do this here and nobody else does this, because that's who we are. That's how we're built. I love those. In the Amish communities, they do these barn raisings where, everybody will come out, and over the course of a day or two, they'll raise the whole barn. And it's pretty amazing to see, and like, talk about connected and giving and progress and effort. Um, these, like, and things, traditions should be unique to your community. This in Buffalo and Pittsburgh, the Dingus Day is a Polish tradition. Like, that wouldn't work just anywhere, but it works in those communities because it really reflects where people migrated from. Of course, celebrating local history. Again, what trials and tribulations did a community go through? What did they overcome? Who is amazing that came from the town, and celebrating them. Here's a tradition I started actually in the town where I was first a Main Street manager in Ohio, where on Thanksgiving morning we hiked up what was called Mount Pleasant, and this little overlook over the downtown, and it was the best. Like, it brings tears to my eyes every time I did it. It was, it's like, it didn't make any sense to do, and it was the best thing to do, and it was so fun and so cool. Another one is increasing standards. How do we raise these up? Because we have to want better. Like, we have to demand better of everybody. And honestly, when things get better, everybody benefits. When building standards improve, everybody's life benefits. Like, when we ask more of one another, we give them a chance to be more successful. There's no downside to raising standards. So some of the ways, one I love is a vacant property registry. Like, vacant property is an absolute curse on communities. There's no reason we should stand for it. Communities should crack down on it. And there's a lot of great legislation on how you can do that. But start by bugging city council people, bugging your local administration, and like, show up to meetings and demand that something gets done. But and feel free to email me after if you want some examples. I just saw a really great piece of legislation from what's the name? It's in central Nebraska, but pretty small conservative town. They passed vacant property registry, and the registration was $500 every 6 months. It started at $500. You had to pay it every 6 months, and it doubled. And they are no longer dealing with vacant property. This started in Paris, but New York's done it. I believe Knoxville has done it, and it's a noise camera, in essence. So for people that really, really want to impress other people with their loud trucks and motorcycles, it automatically tickets them. Because why should everybody in town have to get woken up by some guy that's needs to, is dealing with some inadequacies and wants us to all know, like, it's okay to have standards. We really should, and it makes the town nicer. I really love this in the Juniata Valley, where this is just a nice nudge. Hey, we noticed that you cleaned up your garden or dressed something up. Like you can also do it in real positive ways, which I love. And it's really, really important to raise your standards with your nonprofits. It's not good enough just to be free on Thursday evening to be a board member. Like, no, you should give money. You should give a bunch of time. You should host get-togethers. Like, you should bring something to the table. If I were asked to sit in a nonprofit and they said, I don't expect anything of you, I know that I'm not going to have a good experience because I'm not going to get anything from that service. Like, oh, you have 12 board members that don't do anything? Cool. What a phenomenal waste of my time. But if it's say like, yeah, you're gonna have to work really hard and give a bunch, like, okay, now we're talking. Like, there's probably will be a reward for being involved in that organization. And you can raise standards and still experience the national chains if you want them. And I really loved this story. I was working with Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and we had this long talk about standards. And in essence, like, they were of the opinion that red tape was discouraging investment, and I explained that that's backwards. That red tape is mitigates risk. Like, having people get a driver's license makes the road safer. Having some rules makes the road safer. Like, more people are willing to participate if it's not so risky. Having some red tape around how to build, how to develop, mitigates risk and is more attractive to investors. And this conversation went really well. The city kind of, they decided to raise their standards. And I mean, not that it's direct correlation, but it wasn't long after that somebody proposed it for $40 million new headquarters there. And it was funny about when they proposed it, the city planning commission went back and said, that's nice, but we need some changes. Like, we're not just going to accept that as is. And it was really cool to see them sort of be rewarded. And the developers like, oh, of course. It was cool to see them be rewarded for raising their standards. We've got to increase ownership and engagement. So some of the ways that we can do that, make the point that, people don't tend to wash their rental cars. When we don't feel any sense of ownership, when our communities don't have good public space, when they don't have any local, businesses, like, that same connection isn't there. We don't feel the need to take care of them the same. So some of the best ways we can do that is great public space. It's a real reminder all the time when you have beautiful public space that, hey, this is my town. This is something that we share and we should take care of it. I love that the mayor over in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, does this litter and libations. On the second and fourth Saturday of the month, they go clean up trash and drink beer. And it's had a huge turnout and people love it. And it gives them a chance to put in effort, make progress, and be social all together. Cleanups are such a phenomenal way to foster pride. And it's just like, when you clean up a street or a riverbank or whatever, you always feel a sense of connection, like you have a little ownership there. So, oh, excuse me. Sorry if I just flew out everyone's eardrums. One of the other best way, one of the ways I'd love to also increase that sense of ownership is there's organizations, particularly the Incremental Development Alliance, that teaches cities and small potential developers how to do it. Like, how can your city be more real estate developer friendly? And also, how can you teach people that might be interested in becoming real estate developers so that you can start building new homes and new buildings and the things that you need to house all the people that you want come into your town? Because there's certainly a shortage of housing everywhere. And it's because we're really terrible about letting people build anymore. Communityness, it's by design. We have to design space within our towns for people to get together and experience that. And if there's ugly places, with nothing to do, where you don't feel like hanging out, don't expect people to hang out. Like, that's not how it works. It's not enough just to live near one another. We have to make it worthwhile. We have to put in the extra effort to make those spaces. Here's a good example of, here's a graph where it shows how the lines that go between the buildings that depicts foot traffic, where people move around, where they met up with friends, where they were social. And as you see, as traffic increases, as vehicular traffic increases, that foot traffic goes down. And so it's important sometimes to set aside space just for people. Like, people need space to get together, and cars have plenty. Things like block parties, making block parties extremely easy to host is such an easy, simple, cheap way to increase that sense of community, to get people together and help them build, grow those roots in their town. This community down in South Carolina, really simple. If you have the yard sign for the Front Yard Friday at 5:30, you are hosting people drinking beer in your yard. Like, nice, easy way for people to get together, and something we should do a lot more of. During COVID, there's the New Jersey bar scene. I started a kickball league that just so happened to save a 30,000 square foot awesome old hotel. Just made a bunch of friends with this kickball team, and one day the city went, there was this campaign to tear down this building, and he emailed everybody in the league, and most of them didn't care about old buildings and they weren't into preservation or whatever, but because I asked them as a friend if they would come out, they all stood in front of this, and the city decided, like, oh wow, people really care, and they didn't tear down this building, and later it was a $6 million investment. It's kind of the cornerstone of the downtown now. And appearances, the way things look absolutely shapes our opinion of them. Like, that is how we operate. That is how we navigate through the world, is looking at things and determining, like, is that safe? Is that okay? We need to be cognizant of that and accept it, and sort of embrace it, because that's the self-esteem of our town. Like, the same way that, if you look in the mirror and are frustrated about your appearance, you don't feel as good. It's the same as looking at your town. I've always hated the cliche, never judge a book by its cover. Like, of course we judge books by its cover. That's why we design book covers. Like, this is the same book, but we have a totally different concept of what these two books are about from the cover. Or, for example, that if I, were to leave my meeting tonight in downtown Jacksonville, and I go on a murderous rampage and got arrested, if I had to pick two attorneys to defend me from one of these two, I can tell you pretty, clearly who I'm going to pick. And is that unfair? Or, like, if my life is, hanging in the balance, like, I'm going to pick the person that presented themselves professionally. What somebody wants us to know about them is how they appear. And that's what we're always learning from appearances. Like, this is the information that somebody is communicating with how they take care of themselves, or how they take care of their home, or they take care of their city. And I understand there might be a million different, reasons behind whatever, why these places look this way. But at the end of the day, we are still making opinions based on appearances all the time. And we're making judgments about these places. And not only does it affect the people that drive past, it extremely affects the people that call these places home. You can't not help but feel crummy and run down crummy places. And over time, that erodes people's self-esteem and their decision making, and it makes the town worse. It's a recipe for addiction and crime and all these other problems. So we can also improve that. So, like, yes, appearances matter, and we can make them better. There's always room to improve. We can tear down. I mean, there's one of my favorite examples in Nijmegen, Netherlands. The city had a vote for the ugliest building in town. That one won. They tore it down and built a prettier building. Like, our cities can get prettier. It's free to pick up trash. It is free to pull weeds. It is free to plant hostas and lilies. Like, there's so much that can be done without money that can start to make our communities prettier, and have to start doing it if we want people to feel better about them. But ultimately, I'm going to skip this and just get to the last. Ultimately, what's most important is that we take action. None of this matters if we don't put in the work. Like, you can talk about going to the gym forever, but you just need to go out for a run. You just need to go to the gym. The perfect plan won't fix it. We don't need to have meetings and more meetings and do more plans about what our communities need. Like, you need to pull weeds. You need to plant trees. Like, you need to scrape paint. There's nothing more powerful than taking action and stop to, like, if you think about an hour-long meeting where 20 people sat and listened to reports, like, that was a collective 20 hours that could have gone to beautification, that could have gone to fixing someone's front porch, that could have gone to something that really makes a difference. So I want you to keep that in mind, that so much of what we're dealing with is apathy. The opposite of apathy is pride, but you have to put pride into action and really get to work. And when you do that, people feel better. There's a sense of satisfaction of putting in effort and making progress and seeing things get better. So thank you very much. And I will turn it back over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Jeff. We're over our schedule, but that's okay.
Sorry.
No, you're okay. We'll figure it out as we're going along. Does anybody have any quick questions for Jeff that you want to unmute or put in the chat box? It's a lot to unpack. It is a lot to unpack in 45, 50 minutes for sure. And every time this is the second time I think I've seen the presentation, but it always makes me think about little things that we could do differently in our communities and action that we could take right away to build up that community pride, because it's just so true. I think a lot of times we just get so used to this is the way things are, or this is the way things have always been, or we lost our grocery store. That's just, it's the way it is going to be. Which just kind of creates more apathy. Yeah. Okay, Forsyth, what are your thoughts on walking streets in small communities, less than 2,000 people? Oh, I think you're on mute.
I assume you mean like streets that are closed off to vehicular traffic. I think it's good to take back space whenever you can. I mean, I know that there was cars have a lot of room already, and they dominate near everything. And I think when you see back a little bit of space to humans, like they flock towards it, they love it, and they tend to use it. And I know that there were some places where it was tried in the 70s or 80s where it didn't always work, but I think that those were more like big, like outdoor mall type spaces, and not necessarily more residential. I don't know. If they're done right, I think they can be really great if they're pretty, and if it's not just like, you can't just take a parking lot and say, oh, this is public space now, and think it'll be good enough. I think there has to be a fair amount of design treatment to make them good. But boy, people love to be together. They just need some space to do it.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Forsyth. We got time? One more question. Does anybody have one more question before we transition into hearing from Broadus? Okay, Dylan's writing us a question, but I think they must have accidentally hit the return button. Oh, what do you think of turning streets into one ways?
I don't know. A lot of times one ways can lead to faster traffic. And I think when commercial businesses, it's like the goal should be to reduce traffic speeds. And so I think the idea often of one ways is to increase traffic speed. And so it seems less safe, not as good for business. So I think more narrow streets, the more sort of chaos the street is, the slower people go, the safer they are, the more like people are to use them. But I don't, also not anywhere close to a traffic engineer or mobility expert. So I could be getting these wrong. But those are my thoughts.
Okay, so with that, I think we are going to have to transition so we can kind of remotely stay on time, or they'll all be cussing me when they go to their conversation. So
I'll tell them
Jeff,
to cuss me. It was my fault.
No, it's all right. Just want to thank you for joining us tonight and coming on and sharing your insight into civic apathy and building community pride. I just think it's a topic we can't talk enough about, especially with our small towns, because we just get into this downward spiral. When one negative thing happens, we just seem to become really indifferent and okay and lower our standards. Oh, somebody just said they just lost their ability to hear us. Is that Powder River County? Can you not hear me? Can you hear me? Tara, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Okay, cool. All right. So anyway, we got a transition. Thank you so much for spending some of your evening with us. We really appreciate it. I'll share Jeff's website with you all tomorrow, and his book, because it's great too. And I get little nuggets out of it all the time and love to share them. So again, thank you so much
Jennifer.
for coming on and joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. So thank you. Okay, I am going to see if I can share my screen again, and we'll see if Powder River County is on with us. Okay. All right, can you guys see my ladies?
We cannot.
You cannot. Yes. Share screen too. Oh, I have to hit the share button. Now can you see them at the
Yes,
table?
we can.
Okay, thanks, Skylar. Okay. All right. So Broadus, did you all get back
Hey,
connected?
so can you hear
Oh.
us? Because we can't hear you at all. I can see that you've been talking, but we can't hear you at all. So can you give us like 2 minutes to try a few things? You can hear us really well. Okay, well, this is weird. I think it's just a computer issue on my end. Let me try something with my Zoom.
I would try getting out of the meeting and then I'll let you back in, rejoining the meeting and seeing if you can default to your normal settings there. And you're also welcome to give me a call if Jennifer needs to move on.
Okay, so did they, I don't see them. They must have jumped off. Okay, well, I'll give you, while they're trying to get back on and get this figured out, I'll give you a little bit of a background information on what's happening in Broadus. So Broadus is a very small town, frontier actual town, southeast corner of the state, very close to Wyoming, South Dakota. They have about, I want to say, don't quote me on this, about 400 people in their community of Broadus, which is the county seat for Powder River County. They have participated in Reimagining Rural in the past.
We're back.
You're back? Okay.
And we can hear you. So sorry. We had it right up until like until we messaged in, recognizing we were hopping on. And then we're like, oh no, we can't hear them.
It's okay. It's all right. We're just going now. Okay.
Okay.
So we're going to jump into this conversation, much like the previous two sessions. We're going to do this more like an interview style. So sitting in Powder River County in the extension office in beautiful Broadus in Powder River County is Jackie Beardsley. She's the MSU extension agent there, and Missy Billing. And Missy by profession is a CPA, and community volunteer extraordinaire, like spark plug. So I asked them to join us tonight specifically because one of the reasons was they were a recipient of the Montana Tourism Pilot Project grant in cohort 1. And one of the things that they chose to do for planning purposes was invite Jeff Siegler in to do a civic assessment. In addition, they also had Roger Brooks come from the Destination Development Association. And so he did a tourism assessment. So we're just going to ask the ladies in Broadus a few questions. And they were gracious enough to share some photos. And I also grabbed some that I had taken. Another project that they're involved in is they're in the, we don't really call it cohort 1, but they're in the first group of the Community Heart and Soul Communities, which is a program that Montana Community Foundation is bringing to Montana. It's a national program. And I happen to be the coach for Broadus. And so I get to go to Broadus and visit with these ladies a lot and hear like all the exciting stuff that's happening. Okay, so I'm going to just jump into these questions. Can you ladies briefly share what your community has been working on lately with our audience? What are some of the projects and things you've been doing?
So I would say, I mean, we're also a Main Street community. So we have been working on a downtown master plan for that. But basically we've really been building community has sort of actually been our focus. So lots of conversations with people, lots of different things. And a lot of it goes back to Reimagining Rural. Like we started, I think 2020, and then we did it in 2021. And it seemed like what was missing was our ability to have capacity to even do things. So out of that came, okay, we need big sky, big leadership. So like extension and all of the great stuff that you guys have to offer has really helped us build leaders. So I think 2022, we had 23 people that graduated from the program. And then 2024, we had 15 more people. So it's like, that has helped shift the vibe a little bit. our Chamber of Commerce. Now, instead of just sitting and having meetings, we changed our structure. So we're out there actually doing things in the community 4 times a year. So people see us doing things, and it's changing the conversation. Literally making connections, I guess, having the conversations. So yeah, now we've got pilot community tourism, we've got heart and soul. We're working on proactive coaching in our school to sort of change mindset. And yeah, just lots of cool things going on. Our sense of home and connection has also brought in huge donations to our endowment fund as well. So yeah, lots of opportunities to grant money and make things happen. Sorry, my brain is on taxes, so I apologize.
No, you're okay.
for answering the question.
No, that's okay, because you also do have a local community foundation.
Correct.
Through, right, Taylor, through Montana Community Foundation.
Correct.
So you do have a local endowment. So you do have some financial, I shouldn't say you do have some financial resources. You have great financial resources available as far as for your community. Oh, go ahead.
I think the other part of that is, as a result of Reimagining Rural and the first leadership class, they revived the Powder River Area Economic Development Council.
Right.
And that is the council that has sought out the pilot tourism grant, has worked with our local government to seek out the Montana Main Street grant, and has sought out the opportunity for the Community Heart and Soul project as well. And those leaders are who have taken that spearhead. And so Extension has supported that process and definitely been an integral part of it. And our leaders in our community kind of started that and kept it going. I know sometimes when you're working with local government, you can run into just logistical issues. And that's one thing that's been really wonderful about the Powder River Area Economic Development Council is we have a nonprofit that is willing to take on these big grants and kind of tackle some of that process, which has been really helpful for us in applying for them and then also using those funds in our community as well.
So Jackie, what I'm hearing is from you guys, for one of the biggest takeaways for you all is that human capacity, that leadership capacity, was that you went to you did Reimagining Rural. You realized that things weren't getting done. You probably didn't have enough folks at the table doing the work. And that led to the start of Big Sky Big Leadership, which some folks out there might not know what that is. It's a community-based leadership program, which Extension is kind of the lead behind it, but it's done locally. So you started a leadership program, and then the leadership program helped revive that economic development organization, which is kind of the backbone and the driver, because it's its own nonprofit organization, which is 501c3 organization, super helpful to have in small towns. Okay, so next question is, how has the culture, the vibe of the community pride, since we're talking apathy, community pride, how has it evolved since you've made some of this progress, and even since you've gotten the tourism grant and brought in some of these outside resources?
I think we have different perspectives on this.
Right.
So I'm going to have Missy go first.
I wanted you to go first.
Oh, okay, I'll go first. So just to provide some perspective, I am from Powder River County. I moved back to the community in July. So I've only been here about 6 months. And of course, a little bit of perspective, my predecessors, one of which who was my mom, were integral in this process. And so I've heard a lot about what was happening and got to be excited about it for my home community from the periphery, and then got to step into helping and doing the work. And so from my experience, there is a ton of community pride and vibrancy happening in our community in a way that I could not have anticipated or expected when I left, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, graduating from high school and leaving, and then going on to get my degree and move home. And what I'm seeing is that other people my age, younger, older, kind of in that age range, are moving home. And so it's not just me seeing that potential or wanting to be engaged in that. We see this as a wonderful place to live, a wonderful place to raise our families, and a place that we want to be, when really with remote work, you could be anywhere and we're still choosing this as our home. And I think to have that in a community our size, for perspective, Broadus has 500 people. The Powder River County, I think, has like 1,200 total, right in there, between 1,200 and 1,500. And Broadus is the only community that has like a high school in it. We have a few peripheral grade schools, but this is our only high school. And so I think for that to be happening here is really incredible. I think when you've been doing work here for a long time, it can be kind of daunting and overwhelming and feel like you're not making as much progress as you want. Is that?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, I think that for me, the connections has really always been the heart of it. And the more of those connections that are made, the more the pride is starting to happen. So yes, you saw pictures of us cleaning stuff up and being out there doing things and having people volunteer, and those things are getting people to have the conversations. But just being ready to listen and people feeling heard has just sort of changed the vibe. And yes, we've become really good at filling out applications and moving forward with getting excited about let's do this and let's do that and whatever. And yeah, sometimes I'm like, well, we're not a success story yet. Like that's going to come when something happens. But yeah, when you can ask people to show up for a meeting and almost 80 people show up in our small community to come listen to that, it's like, oh, I guess that maybe was a little bit of a success that those people came, but we haven't done anything yet. So I'm guilty of being like, yeah, but we haven't done anything yet. Like we got to keep pushing. So yeah, there are some great things happening. And yeah, when I call and ask someone to show up, like they'll show up. And I don't think that always happens in communities. So, I mean, that's the sense of place, the sense of home, the sense of ownership. And just being authentic and letting people know this is what's expected of you. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm actually going to show up. And hopefully we laugh and maybe we have some beer and some pizza because that's what Jeff tells us that we have to do. So sometimes there's that goes on too. But yeah, I think that at the end of the day, yeah, we're making progress. We still have a ways to go, but pride is alive and well. And yeah, our golf team brought home our first state championship. So we hung that in the gym, which was our catalyst to start our Civic Pride campaign, 25 projects in 2025. So we did it at the gym at the same time they hung the banner. And yeah, great vibes going on there too.
We're hoping it gets above 0 soon so we can get started on those projects.
Oh, we talked about that earlier. Okay, so we have a question, and I know this probably a lot of people are asking on here that where did Broadus get the giant chess pieces? So that's the picture of you.
Oh yeah, that was me. So I actually ordered them. I think off of Wayfair maybe. So we got a community grant from the Powder River Community Endowment Fund. And then yes, I got bit by ants while I sat and painted that chessboard on there. But yes, so we have checkers too that goes with it. And yeah, it's just our little pocket park that the Chamber of Commerce has sort of adopted as our thing. And yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, their extension agent needs to get some pest control out there because the ants are a little bit of an issue.
Right.
So what were some of the so things are going, I mean, yes, you have like I understand because a lot of communities don't really see themselves as being successful until they see tangible projects. But I can tell you that I think almost every small town across Montana is just chomping at the bit to get the tourism, or maybe not every community, but a lot of the communities want in on the tourism grant, and you guys were able to do that. So that is a huge win. Challenges. Can you speak to any challenges that you've experienced as you've went along?
I think there's always people who don't want to see change sometimes. And I think that for a while there was actually even a group of people that are like, well, we don't want people to visit because it'll bring extra traffic, and maybe parking becomes an issue and all of that stuff. So that has definitely been a challenge of shifting some mindset with people a little bit. And yeah, I think every small town like has that list of people that it's like, okay, like these are the people we need to get on board, or the people that we need their seal of approval to move forward on this, or they're going to be the most negative people ever. And so we kind of made that list, and like some of those people have become the biggest cheerleaders actually. And it's like, wow, like, I don't know how we fixed your personality a little bit, but it's like they were super excited. But yes, I mean, part of it was, yeah, education, conversations, again, making that connection with them so they felt heard and they understood that, well, yeah, I mean, we want to keep our identity. Like, we don't want Broadus to change so much that you, having lived here your whole life, don't recognize it anymore. But yeah, we have to recognize that, again, if we don't revitalize, if we don't do something, we will die. We'll go away.
And I think that something that Missy spoke to really well there was, you know, you have to go slow to go fast. I think sometimes we get really excited about doing the work. I mean, you just heard from Jeff, like, get out there, do something, do it, like, just make a move. And if you're new to your community or new to this work in particular, or maybe you've been doing it a long time, it can be easy to get project focused and check the list without onboarding the people that really need to be a part of it and have that buy-in. And that's so important. And I know that that's hard when you're in your community and you want great things for your community. And why can't everyone just see that we want great things for our community and just have that buy-in? And it takes time, and it really does take finding those naysayers and those people that, you know, have done the work before, or maybe tried something that didn't work then, or are thinking, you know, that whole, we tried it and it didn't work. That's like such a pet peeve of mine. And really hearing them and having that conversation with them and maybe bringing them along. And it takes that part of it takes so much more time than the cleaning up a park or painting a building. I mean, all of that takes time and it takes volunteer effort, but that part can really be the part that makes the difference in your community and how they experience that change and how they want to be a part of it. And I think that's so important.
So very much making sure that you're being inclusive of everybody who, and this is such a heart and soul phrase, but everybody who lives, works, and plays in your community, and doing that work on the forefront. You guys, good job, heart and soul community.
Right.
Yes, yeah. That is such a heart and soul thing, but it's so true. It is very, very true.
Missy said it so well when she said those connections, and that's really what's brought that community pride and that community engagement, is that connection. And
it's
that
people
comes
feeling
back to heart and soul for sure, but it also comes back to this work.
Yes, so totally. Okay, so very quickly, 2 more questions. Is there anything specific, since you did have Roger Brooks come in and Jeff come in, is there anything specific that you've seen happen or get done as a result of them coming into your town?
Absolutely, yeah. They were definitely a catalyst for lots of little things. Like, so we have a local flower shop that does vinyl and signage and whatever. So it was like, we had the Roger Brooks here, and he did his community video with his findings and his suggestions. And a lot of businesses were called out that you need better signage, you need hours on your door or whatever. And they were inundated for the 2 days following that presentation with people ordering signage for their businesses. The hardware store got busy selling paint because people who were called out who needed a paint job or whatever, like, people actually were like, oh, let's do that. And I think the critical piece there, and yeah, maybe you don't have the money to afford to bring those people in, but to me, the critical piece is sometimes it has to come from a quote unquote outsider. Like it cannot be people, your peers and people from in your community that say, you know, you really need to paint your building, if that makes sense. It needs to come from someone else, similar to raising children. We can say to our kids, you need to do this, you need to do this, and they will not listen and they will never do it. But if someone else says the exact same thing, they will listen. So I think to me, the fact that they came with these credentials made them credible, and the fact that they weren't from here, there's been lots of changes, lots of discussions, lots of physical things that you can see. People who didn't even attend the meeting, but their neighboring business heard that they were called out as needing to be fixed. Like those conversations and those connections are happening. So now those things are in the works for some facelift and some stuff. So,
and I think there's some things you get used to seeing in your community. If you're from that community, you get adjusted to just, you know, some of the overall wear down, those sort of things that you're just like, oh yeah, that's just how that is. And that outside perspective really brought that to light in a way where many people had kind of gotten used to it. And I think that's really important for you to see and to have that perspective, especially when you're talking about something like pilot tourism or tourism, right? How do other people see this that aren't from here, that don't know that?
It's almost, I think you guys, I mean, having been a little bit on the outside, on the periphery of it, but it sounded to me like you guys had a little bit of a rip the Band-Aid off conversation. Like they brought up some stuff that was a little uncomfortable, maybe a little painful, and caused immediate friction, but in the long run, maybe has done some good, was maybe ultimately good for the community. One more question, then we have to switch so that the towns can have their time to have their conversations. What is one piece of advice that you would give to these communities who might just be starting out down this path?
Be patient. It's not going to happen immediately. And when I say find your community, so I'm like, there's cheerleaders and there's critics and there's wisdom sources and there's workers, and you need to find those people and be patient, and with those people building that team, you can do anything, and money helps.
And
Money helps.
Having been a new participant to Reimagining Rural a few years ago, I know it can be kind of wild and daunting to hear from communities like Broadus who have a lot of things happening. And I just want you to know that it took us years to get here. There have been massive community changes and support that has happened over years. And so whatever you come up with to start with is someplace to start, and that's wonderful. Do that. Don't be overwhelmed by where we're at, and know that wherever you're starting, it's okay. It counts. It's progress, and you are doing something, even if it feels like nothing for a while. And that's all part of the work.
Awesome. So thank you, good ladies, for taking time, because I know you had I think it was an economic development meeting again tonight too. So you kind of did double duty, it sounded like. So we very much appreciate. Does anybody have any quick questions for the gals from Broadus? I should ask you that. I can't see the chat, so I'm not. Oh, here we go. Jump to the latest. Okay, so it looks like people have been. Okay. We will, we're running out of time, and I'm trying to be aware of that. We will share their contact information. So if folks want to, how do you organize? Was that just from Carrie Lewis? Yeah, Carrie at Cut Bank. How'd you guys get organized?
No, that was one of our gals here, but just in terms of maybe monthly meetings, or is there a structure, or what's that look like?
Gotcha.
Hold on 1 second.
I don't know what she's grabbing.
Oh no.
I think she has a visual to share.
I do have a visual.
And
I'll send it to you. I'll send the visual to you guys too. But I don't know if you guys can see this. Jennifer has this maybe electronically, But everything
Yes.
comes back to that Powder River Area Economic Development Council. And all of those other parts link back to that. And so we have those as monthly meetings. Pilot tourism is its own meeting. It has its own guidelines with the steering committee. And same with Heart and Soul. We're kind of navigating that right now. But just to provide some perspective here, and I'll send an electronic copy so that Jennifer can send this out to all of you that might be interested in kind of how it is. This was just a way to organize it for me. I think steering committee meets monthly.
We do.
Powder River Area Economic Development Council meets monthly, sorry. And Civic Pride was kind of just a kickoff of Jeff's, and we're still kind of navigating what that looks like. But it's so community driven. We kind of use Extension and Powder River Area Economic Development Council as our center point for communicating out and go from there.
And I think the critical piece, I guess, the way the Economic Development Council bylaws were written was to have at least 10 members, and it was very specific of the different nonprofit type groups and governmental entities as well to have representatives from those groups. So that's why it's sort of become the hub, because it's got a chamber member, it's got people from the town council, it's got people from the county commission, it's got people from Extension, it's got people from the school and the wrestling clubs and all of those types of things. So it's sort of the center point where people can kind of go out and gather other community input and then report back. And then if there's focus groups or action teams or whatever, it's easy to push those out to those other groups. So that was critical, I think, in making it successful moving forward.
So it was good thinking on the front end of how that organization was put together.
Yes.
Actually, that's very good thinking. Okay. We've got to turn so we can shut down and let these communities have their conversation. I just completely blew the time frame out of the water tonight. That's my fault. I'm sorry. But just want to tell you guys, Jackie and Missy, thank you for joining us. Thanks for taking the time and joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. And we will share contact information. So if any of the other communities want to reach out to Broadus and learn more about what they're doing and what's happening there, I'm sure they would be delighted, especially if it's after taxes are due and stuff. But I'm sure that Broadus would be delighted to assist. So thank you, ladies, for joining us. We very much, we appreciate it. Okay. So local conversations, it is 7:32. We'll go to 7:55. At 7:55, we'll come back on and do a debrief and close the session down. You guys are, those of you, if you're having great conversations, you can keep on keeping on. No offense to us. It's perfectly fine. So questions, if you need some questions, here are a few for tonight. Apathy is also called indifference. It's a lack of feeling, emotion, or interest. What's apathy look like in your town? Brainstorm innovative, proactive approaches to meet this challenge. How's your community accessing and utilizing outside resources? And after hearing all of this, what can your town do to take some action to create some small wins and build positive momentum? So here's your questions that if you need them, if you don't, that's okay too. And with that, we'll just stop. I'll stop talking and you guys can start conversing. Okay, folks, we have about 3 more minutes and then we'll come back and just kind of have a closing. Doesn't mean you have to just stop your conversation. Okay, y'all, it's 7:55, which means it's getting close to shutting down the Reimagining Rural session. Doesn't mean you have to stop your conversations. If you can, we'd really love to hear what your project ideas are or what your conversations have focused on. And or if you have more questions regarding the grant from Montana Community Foundation, anything that you want to share or really need to know before we close out this session. Forsyth is discussing how to make the plywood in town plywooddn't. Is that like, are you the plywood in town? Plywood, is that like the over the vacant buildings? Must be. How about anybody else? Does anybody want to, you can unmute as well and ask questions or share? Everybody's just still busy talking because we ran over, because I had extremely poor time management skills tonight.
It's hard. It was great stuff.
Yeah. Okay, we have 3 minutes until we're going to shut her down. So last call for questions, comments, Anything you have a burning desire to ask? I would really like to know what kind of projects you guys are thinking about, but if you're busy, knee deep in conversations, that's fine.
We were talking about purchasing paint to spruce up some buildings that, since that came out of our first impressions tourism assessment, so.
Oh, Rudyard said they're thinking about some planters and tables that could support an outdoor community space.
Jennifer, that just makes me think of Hayes. They just spiffed up a community space in Hayes, and it's used a lot. Like people have birthday parties there. It's really a nice, quiet place, and they just made it beautiful, and people are really taking advantage of it.
That's really cool. I really do think that the whole idea of this is Jeff leans to very urban kinds of communities. But I think the takeaway for his message to me is that pride makes you feel good, and when your community looks good, it feels good, and when it looks good, you feel good about it. And how do we bring back those community spaces that we might be missing or lacking? Oh, when's the deadline for the grant? Forsyth wants to know, Taylor.
In March 31st, so about 6 weeks.
Okay. Okay, it is straight up 8 o'clock. So if we don't have any further questions, we'll give you three extra minutes, 5 extra minutes in case y'all have questions or you want to ask Taylor a question about the grant. Or anything because of my poor time management skills tonight. Oh, Haver said this has given us so many, I missed that one. So many great ideas and such great discussion. I'm glad. Glad. All right. Well, I will also share again our Facebook page for the Reimagining Rural Reimagining Rural group under our Facebook page. And as you guys start working on projects, like send us a line, post some pictures so everybody can see the great work that you guys are all doing. Because at the end of the day, we are really honestly in this all together. And there's so many similarities from community to community, and so many similarities in the issues that we're facing, the challenges that we have, and the projects that we're doing. So there is kind of no sense in reinventing the wheel for every small town. We need to do better working together as well. So with that, it is almost 3 minutes after. if nobody has any more questions or comments, I think we'll go ahead and end our session. We just want to say thank you to all of you for coming out. I swear we must have picked the 3 coldest weeks in the entire year to do Reimagining Rural. But we very much appreciate all of you coming out and joining us. We thank Montana Community Foundation for supporting this program and also supporting our small towns and offering up the grants. And I just want to shout out to Siegler, who keeps everything organized and running behind the scenes, which I very much need on most days. So there she is. I just very much appreciate her staying on with us and kind of being that background support. Again, I will stay in touch with the community coordinators and we'll send out more information about the grants and follow up information about the 20 clues to rural community survival and anything else you all are interested in knowing more about. And again, if you have questions as you're doing the grant application, I'm sure Taylor will help you and I would help you so that we can make this a successful venture for you and your community. So there, I've done way more talking again. So with that, I'm just going to stop and say thank you. Have a good evening and we'll stay in touch. So thanks, everybody.